is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Drivers, start your engines. Pull those belts down tight one more time, warm up those tires, hit your marks, and let's go racing, boys and girls. Nascar, Indycar, Formula One, Formula E, and NHRA Racing Talk. This is the Championship Racing Network. Now here is your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson, with producer John Myers.
Well, two of us anyway. Producer John, still out. Maybe next week. From what I'm hearing. Coach Matt set to join me here just after this first break, and we're going to get into the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit against NASCAR. NASCAR finally coming out with a little bit of information, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. We have not just one, but two medical reports to bring you from the NHRA. Silly season continues. I mean, it's a constant thing, but IndyCar, Formula E specifically, and Formula E is kind of important because they're about ready to begin their preseason testing, and they're about 2 months away from getting back on track and racing. Toyota, those rumors about them returning to Formula One, they're indeed true. We're going to tell you exactly how, and so much more. Got to get things rolling here for the first time in 2 weeks. Coming up next on Championship Racing Network.
Stay right here for more on the Championship Racing Network.
Start your engine!
The green flag is out.
Racing Network.
Hey, welcome in. Appreciate you joining me. I'm Steve West. Producer John not with us this weekend, maybe next weekend from what I understand. But on the phone right now, Coach Matt, road game or home game this weekend?
There's a game at the house this week.
Okay. All right. And this week is kind of important because playoffs on the line, right?
Yeah, we got if we got to get this one today to still have a chance to be in the playoffs.
Okay. So hoping for the best for you here. Kickoff, 9 a.m. Central Time?
9 a.m., that good old Jefferson Pilot kickoff time.
All right. Well, we'll be thinking about you as we get into hour number 2 here on the show and hope everything turns out just fine for you. We wanted to talk about a couple of things here. We'll get into full recaps and all that kind of stuff coming up after we're done with Coach Matt. We want to take this time to kind of go through and highlight a couple of fairly big stories here. And we got to get back to this lawsuit because this lawsuit between 2311 and Front Row Motorsports on one side of it and NASCAR on the other just seems to continue to take on more and more layers on it. As they promised when they filed the lawsuit, both of the race organizations filed the injunction in the Western North Carolina Court District that would, if approved, allow them to continue to race next year as if they still had their charters. Otherwise, they go back to NASCAR when the new year dawns. Wednesday, the two organizations asked the judge to allow that request while the suit progresses. The two teams have hired, as we noted, Jeffrey Kessler, top antitrust lawyer. He's taken on several bigwig organizations, including the NFL and the NCAA before. He talked to the AP this week. He said that the two teams could still sign the charter agreement if they could get a court order that releases their clause in the charter deal that prohibits teams, and we've talked about this both on this show, I think 2 weeks ago, and we certainly have talked about it on the Cross Flags podcast. There is a clause in the new charter agreement that prohibits teams from suing the sanctioning body. NASCAR says they don't comment on pending cases and had not officially talked about it. But I think they kind of got forced here because in addition to the injunction, there was a request, a public records request that Kessler is asking for documents and files from 6 different NASCAR executives, 3 of them from the France family, Jim France, Lisa France Kennedy, and her son Ben Kennedy, along with NASCAR President Steve Phelps, COO Steve O'Donnell, and Senior VP of Global Strategy. This is a name that we're not overly familiar with. His name is Scott Prime. Amongst the things they're asking for, the 2016 contracts between NASCAR and the independently owned tracks that have hosted at least one Cup Series race. There aren't that many, but you can look at them and find them. Indianapolis, really. Pocono is another one. But otherwise, not a whole lot. Documents surrounding NASCAR's acquisition of International Speedway Corporation, ISC, which, they previously were the entity that owned tracks like Daytona, Talladega, Darlington, Richmond, so on and so forth. Automobile Racing Club of America, we call them ARCA, also asked for the charter agreement provisions from restrict teams from competing in non-NASCAR sanctioned events using Gen 7 parts and cars. All NASCAR said is that they were going to oppose the preliminary injunction with the hearing set for this coming Wednesday. And I'm going to dive into this probably a little bit later. Their opposition was based, though, on 3 fairly detailed points, basically trying to state that the plaintiffs had no legal ground, I guess is probably the best way to sum it up. You've kind of looked into this. What are you thinking?
Well, there's so much of it, and there's no other way to say it. There's so much of it that got thrown down from NASCAR side yesterday. But I keep pivoting back, and I keep pivoting back, and pivoting back to when Jeffrey Kessler did his interviews and was talking to multiple media outlets regarding this whole situation. And if you go back and you read what he's talking about, just to be point blank honest, I think he's got them hook, line, and sinker with this right here.
Okay.
Because with them having that clause of if you sign this, you're giving up and waiving all of your abilities and your rights to have any lawsuits brought forward for antitrust, that is a direct violation of, to my knowledge, that is a direct violation of Section 1 and Section 2 of the Sherman Act. And that's where he keeps pivoting to, and I think he's going to get him on that right there, because that's basically saying when you sign this, you're clearing us of any wrongdoing.
Yes.
To my understanding. Yeah. So I think that's where he's going to have them hook, line, and sinker, unfortunately.
Okay. And I see where you're coming from.
And that's where 2311, and it's especially Curtis Polk, Denny Hamlin. I think MJ's been off of it a little bit further than normal, but I think that's where Curtis Polk and Denny Hamlin and Bob Jenkins, the three owners, have got them hook, line, and sinker.
Okay.
I think.
And you've probably seen this or at least read a little bit about it. And for some of our listeners and viewers on CRN Live on YouTube, they may not have. According to what we are understanding, NASCAR President Steve Phelps wrote a letter to 2311 specifically. I don't know whether a copy of this got sent to Front Row Motorsports. It kind of detailed their side. Racer.com says that in the letter, some of the things detailing the concessions that NASCAR says that they've made includes things like NASCAR agreeing to meet well in advance of the timeline outlined in the existing charter agreement to begin good faith obligations, renewal obligations. And we talked a little bit about this, and I'm not trying to defend NASCAR, but I will say this. We did see several extensions of the deadline here, mostly because of the fact that the teams were not signing. And NASCAR had to go back and rework it and then come back to the teams and try it again. Another point, NASCAR agreed to extend the term length beyond the current media rights agreement. NASCAR agreed to renewal right protections. NASCAR created a team advisory committee to solicit additional input from the teams on major strategic decisions for the industry. I did not write this, so if I trip over it, I apologize. NASCAR absorbed all costs of hosting and maintaining the team website on the NASCAR platform. NASCAR lowered the transfer fee from the initial proposal. They waived debt limits, increased the amount of private equity participation, and worked with teams around transfer language. And NASCAR agreed to increase the financial positions of the teams, making them the largest beneficiary of the media revenues to the financial detriment of other industry stakeholders. But even in that situation, we're still talking about a fairly low percentage overall of the media rights deal, aren't we? On that last point.
Yep. Very low.
I mean, we talked about it recently in the fact that is it under the new agreement or under the current agreement that the drivers are only getting like 3% of it and the teams are getting less than 10?
New.
That's the percentages under the new one. And you know, when you stop and consider it, you know, Major League Baseball is a little different because they don't have a salary cap specifically, but you look at the NBA, which has a soft cap, you look at the NFL, which has a much harder cap, but you look at the revenue rights deals, the teams are taking their cuts out of the media rights packages, and granted the NFL's is huge, but still, the teams are taking the money out of the media rights packages, and about just under 50% is going to the players. In other words, 50% of their annual take from the National Football Leagues or the National Basketball Association's annual intake from just television and radio, if it's national, that goes directly to player salaries. Here, it's less than 5%.
Yeah, NBA's is 49%.
Yeah. Now,
exactly.
I understand that there is a sponsorship situation that is also included in this, in that the teams are able to go out and they live off a sponsorship, purportedly anyway. But the amount that it costs to sponsor a NASCAR Cup Series car for an entire year is now in the $25 to close to $30 million range, which is why we're not seeing the days of past when Jimmy Johnson used to get sponsorship from Lowe's for the entire year and Tony Stewart got the sponsorship from Home Depot the entire year. We're not seeing those anymore. We're seeing 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes even more, almost race to race, where these teams are getting primary sponsors. So trying to piece together $25 to $30 million has become exponentially much tougher because one company's not willing to take it on.
Yeah, and another one, FedEx.
Sure. Yeah.
FedEx is on the verge of leaving altogether.
Yeah. So it's only getting that much more difficult. Again, this coming Wednesday, and we don't know what time, unfortunately. We'll be keeping an eye on it while we are taping the latest edition of the Cross Flags podcast, and you never know, we might get a ruling on this. But as much as the teams and Jeffrey Kessler are asking for, this might be this might be a much more involved you want to say in simple injunction hearing. This might be a much more involved hearing than what we initially anticipate.
Well, I did see late yesterday that the injunction hearing was pushed back until November the 4th.
Oh, okay.
Due to hurricane stuff in Daytona Beach.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. You're going to want to make sure you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. So that does make sense in a lot of ways. Plus, let's face it, Western North Carolina, even though I don't know exactly what court-wise the Western District of North Carolina totally entails, we know what's going on in geographically the western part of that state, and it's still a mess. So, yeah, I can't really say that I blame them a whole lot. But, yeah, this thing's going to have to be dealt with sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no doubt. All
right.
It needs to be gotten done quickly. And it seems they're going to get it done quickly with how they're moving.
And I get this. This is preliminarily, and you're not a lawyer. You're not a judge. You don't play one on the radio. Or you don't play one on YouTube. But
Nope.
From your way of looking at this, do you think that NASCAR's got a better way or has the inside line on this? Or do you think that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports are in a really, really good position and might have NASCAR over a barrel?
I'm with what I've read, what I've seen, and what I can gather. It looks to me like right now, unless something else gets uncovered, 2311 and Front Row's got the edge.
Okay. They certainly got the lawyer for it. That's for dang sure.
No doubt.
So it'll be interesting to watch that. All right. When we come back, and these were things that Matt wanted to specifically talk about. All right. So blame him. But you wanted to kind of pivot, and we're going to turn our attention over to what's going on in the world of IndyCar. So we're going to talk about things in Texas because it's constantly changing when it comes to where exactly they're planning on racing. So we're going to talk about that and more when we come back, before we let Coach Matt go here and he gets to go and try and save his team's playoff chances. Stick around. We're just getting underway here. We'll return with Coach Matt by phone. We're just underway on the Championship Racing Network. Appreciate you joining us.
We will be right back with more on the Championship Racing Network. Tires only. And back out to the track for more action on the Championship Racing Network.
We are back. Coach Matt by phone here for this last segment for him on this particular weekend here. And football season goes into about this time next month, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, just double checking. I thought that was what I remember hearing. And again, producer John, I think will be back with us next week in some way, shape, or form. We'll figure out exactly how then. Pivoting our attention over here to IndyCar. Noted this a couple of weeks ago, but over the course of time, and again, we were off last weekend because of the race out at Talladega Superspeedway. As more details comes out, I think it's worth revisiting this. Again, IndyCar is set to return to the state of Texas, and if you hadn't heard, it's not at Texas Motor Speedway, and they're not even going back to COTA, which they raced on 1 year. Instead, they cut a deal with the National Football League's Dallas Cowboys and the Major League Baseball team, the Texas Rangers, and they're going to take on a street race in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex suburb of Arlington, where those two franchises are located. In fact, they're kind of across the parking lot from each other for AT&T Stadium for the Cowboys and Globe Life Field for the Rangers. The race is set to be run on a date yet set, but it's March of 2026, they're telling us. It'll utilize the parking lots of AT&T Stadium and Globe Life Field in a course that'll also go through the city's entertainment district. As for the course itself, the details that we know show that the course is designed by a gentleman by the name of Tony Kottman of NZ Consulting. He's been in charge of a whole lot of the street courses IndyCar's run on, really even going back to before the Champ Car IRL merger into IndyCar. Here's what we know. Course is going to be the longest street course that IndyCar will run on in 2026. 14 turns over 2.73 miles. Features a straight that is said to be 9/10 of a mile. You and I are questioning that. We think it might be longer. It says,
where that stretch that they're talking about between turns 9 and 10. Mm-hmm. I've been on the grounds multiple times where this layout is, and I know for a fact
it's a fur piece.
It's over 1 mile.
There you go. They say 9/10. Either way, we'll go with their numbers, and they say it should allow speeds in excess of 180 miles per hour at least. If this thing is as Matt says, and again, he's been there on the grounds, I haven't, so I'm going to take his word for it. If it does go up over a mile, we're starting to talk now in excess of 200, maybe even 210, because these cars are going to get up to speed, and they're going to get up to speed fast. So it's going to be fun to watch. 2 areas, the course is going to go under existing stadium hospitality and suite areas. That means those places will be particularly expensive. Plus 4 turns that are considered to be perfect passing zones. They're calling turns 1, 10, 12, and 14 specifically. We know that 1 and 14 are, for all intents and purposes, 90-degree corners coming off of that long straight that we were just referring to. Reports also have the city doing road improvements before the 2026 race is slated to take place. That, I think, is important because as you talked about it and we talked about it on the Cross Flags podcast, you just mentioned it. You've been there. You've seen this area. You've seen that road that they're talking about. And you said that's not the smoothest of roads.
No, it is not. Especially in between turns 9 and 10, that's going to go down. It's going to go down the main strip. What I just call it the main strip, over in between the area where AT&T, the backside of AT&T Stadium, that goes down that strip over towards the direction of Globe Life Field, Live by Lowe's and Lowe's Hotel, and over where the old Arlington Stadium is, where the UFL team plays right now. It'll split the difference in between there. That's not the greatest of roads. And 2, that's not the widest of areas either.
Yeah.
It's going to be tight through there.
Okay.
It's going to be very tight through there.
So it'll be interesting to see how they do that. Pit road is going to be between turns 14 and turn 1. It's a decent straightaway. Unless I miss my guess, this is a 4-lane divided highway sort of thing.
It is.
Okay, and
that's going to be the interesting part.
Yeah, so pit road is going to be on one side, obviously, and the racing surface going to be on the other side. And like we were talking about, between turns, what is it, 9 and 10 with that long straight?
Yes.
Okay. This does seem to bring an end to any idea of returning to Texas Motor Speedway. I mean, this is the course that we're familiar with, obviously, if you know NASCAR racing in any way, shape, or form, or if you've been a historian of IndyCar racing, going all the way back really to 1997 when they started racing there, and they raced there through 2023. They just couldn't come to a deal to race there. This past season just ended, and apparently they've decided, you know what, we're not even going to try anymore. But no disrespect to what Jerry Jones and the owners of the Texas Rangers are trying to do. But when I stop and I think about this, wouldn't it have been just as easy to go to Circuit of the Americas? I mean, I get it. We're fairly heavily front loaded there because NASCAR is going to go there early in the year. But, you know, if you're planning on it in March, you could do a doubleheader weekend where NASCAR visits the first weekend and IndyCar visits the next weekend.
It would have made, well, the way things are nowadays, it would have made too much sense to go to Coda.
I guess.
Too much sense. Way too much.
Yeah. The deal was begun apparently because Roger Penske got to know Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. They've known each other for about 20 years. They became really good friends. Jerry Jones released a statement that said this, quote, "We're thrilled to join forces with the Texas Rangers, Penske Entertainment, and the city of Arlington to bring Grand Prix racing to the streets of Arlington. An event of this magnitude is another great reflection of what we imagined over 15 years ago that AT&T Stadium could be a part of." The president of the race, which is officially being named the Arlington Grand Prix, not the Texas Grand Prix, not the Dallas-Fort Worth Grand Prix, but yes, the Arlington Grand Prix. His name is Bill Miller. He's a motorsports veteran. He's been the president of the California Auto Club Speedway. Then he moved on to become president of operations for the Specialty Equipment Market Association. You know them better probably as SEMA. Got a big-time show that they do each and every year out in Las Vegas. It's been a background of many of these car shows, regardless of which one you can possibly think of. Many of them have dealt with SEMA as at least a backdrop there. So, Bill Miller, I don't have a problem with him being a part of this. Overall, I really don't have a problem with the idea of them doing this. But again, I do wonder, was this the best move, or could you have cut a deal to return to Circuit of the Americas? That's the part that kills me. You can't cut a deal with a specific racetrack, Texas Motor Speedway. Why don't you go to the other sanctioned racetrack that is well known around the country and the world and try and go back to a race where you went one time and it was actually quite well received?
Again, some things make too much sense nowadays in today's world. It would have made too much sense. It would have made too much sense to go back to Coda. But no, we got to build a gimmick, and I'll call it for what it's worth, a gimmick racetrack around two sports facilities that personally I care nothing about.
Yeah,
you don't care nothing about them either.
No.
So I mean, I think it's more of a entertainment ploy, if you want to say that.
Yeah, I can't really argue that. And I don't know much about Globe Life Field, truth be told. I've seen it on television on the inside. I don't know really what the outside of it looks really like in a whole lot of detail. I have seen in pictures and in video the outside of AT&T Stadium. I do know that there are suites that not only look inside to where you can see the field, but they look outside as well. These are really more entertainment suites as opposed to just specifically suites for hosting and celebrating football. So I get that. I don't know whether Globe Life Field has something similar to that. I presume that maybe they do, which is allowing them to sell some tickets as well. Because again, why would you involve Jerry Jones to this extent and him to go so far as to put in his statement that this is something he envisioned when he built AT&T Stadium a decade and a half ago, if he did not have the ability for these suites to see outside of the stadium as well as inside?
Right. I mean, and some of the areas where Globe Life Field is going to be encompassed, where the track is going to encompass Globe Life, there's going to be some opportunities to be able to do that same at Globe Life as well. Okay. All right. And I kind of figured there were, but again, having not really seen the outside of the stadium, I couldn't speak to that specifically, so I didn't really know. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other big news that's happened over the past couple of weeks, and we talked about this on this big show 2 weeks ago in Michael Andretti.
who surprised, really, I think, most people by coming out with the announcement that he was stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the organization that has his name up above the door, Andretti Global. Initially, he was quiet about it, but he's talked about it over the past week. And indeed, Dan Torres, who is the partner in the team and also the president and CEO of Group 2001, think Gainbridge and others, Delaware Life, they're going to take over the operations of the racing organization. Andretti finally has released a statement that read, in part, quote, "From an early age, I didn't know anything different than life in the fast lane. Being a son of course, son of Mario Andretti. Be it a proud one, it came with a high bar, and once I pressed the gas, never looked back, stopped at nothing to find success. Drove for the passion, drove for the love of the sport, but I won for the fear of losing. My father's childhood dream became my destiny. Together, we built a legacy and a family business." You think about this. Michael's now 62 years old. Said he wanted to turn things over to his business partner and his friend, Dan, who and will now pivot to becoming an advisor to the team. Exactly what role that becomes, it's still a little bit nebulous. We're not really sure how this will be defined in the long run. But one of the main reasons he gave is one of the main reasons we hear about many, many of these drivers and or team owners stepping away from the day-to-day operations, and it's family. He wants to spend more time with his 10-year-old twins. Yes, he has twins with his most recent wife. He wants to be able to spend time to be a grandfather as well. His son Marco, his Marco's baby girl, Miura, was born on September the 17th. And he concluded his statement by saying, "So this isn't goodbye, it's just the turning of the page." And I'm sure that things on the IndyCar side and things when it comes to Andretti Global's Formula E and IMSA teams, you know, those existing teams that have the infrastructure already built in, they're not really going to be affected by this. I think the biggest part of it for me is, how is this going to affect what the plans are? Because they're stating that they have zero intention of pulling back on their desire to get into Formula One. So how does this affect that, I think, becomes the bigger question.
Honestly, now, it's going to sound crazy, but now that Andretti is more hands-off of it, and it's now under the control and the guidance to get into F1 through Dan Towers and the other people that win the team of Andretti Global, I think it's going to make it easier, honestly, because there's been a lot of gridlock and a lot of headbutting and all kind of stuff.
There's no doubt there,
because Michael Andretti's been involved. And now that he's back out of it, something's telling me it's about to get a little bit easier. It's yet to be seen, but I think it's going to get smoother. And now there's going to be probably a team that ends up getting bought. I think a team's going to get bought, and they're going to be in scot-free.
Who do you think is the most likely team that'll get bought out?
I've got it now that they've eliminated their engine program. I've got Alpine in the crosshairs.
Okay. And we'll get back to that, because team officials are insisting at this point in time that they're not going to sell. But hey, we've seen smoke screens like this before, and it's not like it's outside of the realm of possibility. Renault has sold this team before. It became Lotus, not the car company from Britain, but it became a Lotus, an F1 team. And then after a few years, when they were in the dregs and couldn't make a go of it, Renault came back in and they bought back in. And then a couple of years ago changed the name to Alpine. So I could kind of see it. And I will say this. I know that he went and he knocked on the door at Williams, which is owned by a Doralton Capital here in the United States, and they flatly turned him down. He did go knock on the door of Gene Haas, and Gene Haas said thanks but no thanks. And due to a deal that they just cut this week that we'll detail a little bit later on in the show, they seem to be a lot more on solid ground. And with Audi having taken over Sauber officially, the transition really kicks into gear, I think, next year and becomes official in 2026. They're out. So really, I got to say, you're probably right in the fact that that appears to be the only team that might be willing to go and sell out.
Yeah, I firmly think they're going to be the ones.
Okay. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on it, no doubt about it. All right. Did you see those new rules that NASCAR threw at the teams just when they arrived in Charlotte?
I did not. I did not.
They are, I honestly believe they're listening to us. That they watched Cross Flags on Wednesday, because you and I talked about the differences between what happened to, like, Ryan Blaney at Watkins Glen. He came back later and he admitted, yeah, they made the right call because there was no way I could drive my car back to pit road. And that's the basic idea. Yeah. If you could otherwise drive your car back to pit road, we'll just tow you there and we'll let you change your tires and do all that. It was the Josh Berry situation that happened at Kansas that created all the problem, because the car was otherwise drivable. It just needed one or two new tires. Instead, they was the 4 car needing all 4?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Otherwise, the car would have been able to drive, but they towed him behind pit wall. And then they turn around at Talladega last weekend and brought not just 1 but 2 cars. They brought the 14 car, the teammate to Josh Berry, onto pit road to allow them to change tires and fix some damage that had been done to the bodywork in the huge big one wreck that happened with 5 laps to go. And they also brought Chase Elliott down, towing him down to change tires and do a little bit of damage assessment, the damaged vehicle policy. We said they needed to go by those rules. We effectively told NASCAR, you need to be able to figure out a way to quickly assess these cars. You need to have somebody on site with the safety teams that goes, really, it's all flat tires and cosmetic damage. Put them on pit road. As opposed to, this is major damage. Witness Ryan Blaney again at Watkins Glen. This is too much damage for him to be able to continue anyway. He's done. Tow him behind pit wall. Thank you for listening to NASCAR and the officials. We appreciate it. I mean, that's the best way we can put it. It's about time they figured it out.
Send us our royalties later.
Exactly. Our consulting fee, the bill is in the mail. I hope the check will be too.
Yep.
All right. Kickoff 9 a.m., correct?
Yep.
All right.
Ready.
We hear all the PA announcements in the background. Hope for the best for you and the team. May you continue on your run to try and get into the postseason. You and the boys have a fantastic time, and we'll be hoping for the best. I know for a fact that the weather is going to be fantastic.
Oh, the weather is outstanding out here right now, so it's time to go play the role of Vanderbilt today, boys.
There you go. Go get it. Appreciate you, Matt. We will talk to you again next week right here. And, of course, we've got Cross Flags coming up on Wednesday. All right, so we let Coach Matt go, and now we begin to turn our attention to the meat of the show. We'll get into the race recap and the schedule for this weekend. By the way, if you're on CRN Live, Athena's there. I'm going to give you the ones of the series that we just cover. Athena probably will be giving us a whole lot more. Just go to CRN Live on YouTube. It's pretty cool.
We will be right back with more on the Championship Racing Network. fuel only. Go, go, go. We're back to the Championship Racing Network.
Let's get into it, shall we? And as promised, and thank Athena, I hope I didn't force her hand too much. She's starting working on that racing list on CRN Live on YouTube. Okay, so we weren't on the air last Saturday, as you know. Let's catch you up here a bit, beginning with Friday a week ago in Talladega. Craftsman Truck Series got in a round of 8 playoff race. It had been 8 years. Finally, Grant Enfinger from Fairhope, Alabama, able to claim another win in his home state. Last time he was able to do it, 2016. He was the class of the field, and that dude had a rocket ship of a truck, and he led a race high 34 of 85 laps, and he was able to just get that truck back out front anytime he got shuffled back a little bit. He was able to stay out front after a restart with 9 laps to go, survive the classic last lap attack, gets his first win of 2024, gets the first win ever for the team that he joined this year, CR7 Motorsports. It's his 11th Truck Series win of his career. Enfinger wins. Taylor Gray second. Daniel Dye third. Raja Caruth fourth. One of the best names in racing. Lawless Allen fifth. Christian Eckes, Ryan Reed, Stephen Parsons, hometown racer Brett Holmes with a 9th place finish, and Spencer Boyd claims 10th in that top 10. And with this, Enfinger's now locked into the championship 4. Corey Heim otherwise leads the way. The guys that are on the hot seat for trying to get to Phoenix, Raja Caruth. He's 5 under the cut line, so it's not desperation time, but certainly he's keeping an eye on it. Taylor Gray feeling a little bit less comfortable at 13 points under. Nick Sanchez, now he's 20 points under, but he's also got to climb over 2 other drivers to get there, and in the worst position is Tyler Ankrum. 2 more races are left in this round, so things can change obviously quite a bit, but he's 33 under, and he's, again, in 8th. So he's got 3 other drivers that he's got to climb over in order to make it to the final round and the championship race in Phoenix. Saturday at Talladega belonged to the Xfinity Series, the biggest oval in NASCAR. We have seen this so many times. Race coming down to the last lap for the win, and while it didn't happen on Friday, it did on Saturday. 2 Joe Gibbs Racing drivers were battling it out up front. Chandler Smith got by Sheldon Creed. Then Sammy Smith sees an opening, and with help from Ryan Sieg, gets his nose out front. And he ends up going on to the win, and it's the only lap in the race that he leads. It was the one that counted. It allows him to advance into the next round, their round of 8 in the Xfinity Series playoffs. Your winner, Smith, Ryan Sieg second, trailed by Riley Erbst, Sheldon Creed. Chandler Smith faded to 5th. Jesse Love, Jeb Burton, David Starr, Brennan Poole, and Kyle Sieg rounded out the top 10. The Smiths, Sammy and Chandler, not related, are locked into the next round. Sammy with the win. Chandler is in officially on points. Those who are on the hot seat, AJ Allmendinger's 10 under the cut line. We're going to a quote-unquote road course. He's probably feeling pretty good about it. Sam Mayer, by the way, sets the cut line. We'll get back to him in a moment. I would say Sam Mayer set the cut line. How's that? Justin Allgaier, 18 under, Shane Van Gisbergen, 21 under, and Parker Kligerman, 26 under. This was all before penalties got handed out. Okay. Sunday was the time for the Cup Series. Not surprisingly, came down to overtime after the big one happened. 5 laps to go, the field heading down the Alabama Gang Superstretch. As the field was bump drafting, Austin Cindric leading the low lane. He got turned, and before all was said and done, a Cup Series record 28 cars got involved in some way, shape, or form in this crash. The previous record had been 27. The all-time record amongst any series in Talladega, in a big one, belongs to what we now call the Xfinity Series, when they had 31 cars get involved in a crash. But 28 involved in a Cup Series crash at Talladega in a race. That is the new Cup Series record. Oof. They went red flag. When cleanup was finally completed, racing got back underway. The field, well, it looked very different. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. able to put his racer out front at the right time and bested Brad Keselowski, grabs the win. Second straight race in this round of 12 that a non-playoff driver has claimed the win. Ross Chastain with the win at Kansas. Brad Keselowski was second, William Byron third, Kyle Larson fourth, Eric Jones fifth. Rest of your top 10, Christopher Bell, Justin Haley, Austin Dillon, Bubba Wallace, and Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, before the wreck, he was sitting about 30th. It was not looking good for that 11 car at all. it actually looked a lot, because I was kind of keeping an eye on this. I'll admit it. There were a couple of storylines that I was looking for that we had detailed in the week before's crossed flags before Talladega. And one of the things that I was looking for was to see if any team was going to try and equal what the Stewart-Haas racing team did back in 2018. And if you've forgotten, the 4 drivers that were racing then, the 4 car was driven by Kevin Harvick. The 10 car was being driven by Eric Almirola. The 14 car at that point was driven by Clint Bowyer, and the 41 car was driven by Kurt Busch. And those 4 guys were able to get out there and claim the first 2 rows in qualifying. And they did this beautiful move to where they got lined up 4 in a row. Didn't seem to care who was leading amongst the 4 of them. And they were able to pull away from everybody, because as soon as anybody behind them started to go too wide, they were gone. And I want to say it was at the end of stage 2 that they worked so well together as that foursome that they had a 9+ almost 10-second lead over 5th place coming to the end of stage, I think it was 2. And if it hadn't been for the big one and running out of gas, Kevin Harvick, who knows what they might have been able to do, but they probably would have figured it out amongst themselves. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, number one, the other 3 guys have said that they want to do everything that they can to get Chase Briscoe into victory lane. But then again, you've got the 4-car operation of Joe Gibbs. You got the 4-car operation of Hendrick Motorsports. Nobody seemed to try to rabbit out there and force everybody else's hand. So that storyline was gone. The other storyline was, we saw what Denny Hamlin did, or didn't do, at Atlanta in the first race of the playoffs. And even when he decided he was going to try to do something, it seemed like something kept him from being able to do it. He was riding around the back all day long at Talladega. Didn't seem to care about trying to go and get stage points. Stage 1, stage 2, didn't seem to matter to him. And he was just, with 5 laps to go, lurking around there in 30th. Yeah, he was on the tail end of the field, of the pack, but he didn't seem to have a sense of urgency. 5 laps to go, and when you're running 3 wide practically all day, and for a while 4 wide, we'll get back to that, you're going to have to make your move in my mind, sooner than 5 laps to go. And he seemed content, just hanging back there. Did it benefit him in the end? Yes, it did. But presuming that the big one doesn't happen, he's stuck back there in 30th. I don't know what it is about Denny Hamlin and Speedways all of a sudden. He used to be pretty good there. In case you had missed it, he's got a couple of Daytona 500s to his record. He's not a bad super speedway racer. But for some reason, he's lost his edge. I don't know what the heck the deal is. Anyway, with no playoff contenders winning the first 2 races of the round of 12, William Byron leads on points. Chase Elliott sets the cut line. Joey Logano's 13 under that mark. Daniel Suarez 20 under. Austin Cindric 29 under. And Chase Briscoe's 32 under heading into this weekend's racing. Before you go thinking all is lost, it was just within the last couple of years that Austin Cindric was in the position Chase Briscoe's in right now. He was 12th in points going into the final race of the round of 12. And he won, this was in the round of 8. He was sitting 45 under the cut line going into the Roval race, wins the Roval, and advances himself into the championship. Think about that for a minute. It is possible. Chase Briscoe's a pretty good road racer. Austin Cindric has won at the Roval. Granted, it was under the old way of doing things. Daniel Suarez, pretty good road racer. Joey Logano's not bad at it either. And we all know about Chase Elliott. He's currently the active leader of wins on road courses of the Cup Series. He's got 7 of them. It's behind only Tony Stewart with 8 and Jeff Gordon with 9 all time. So there's a lot of pretty good drivers there who, if they mind their P's and Q's and are not getting into trouble that they themselves cause, you might find a situation where one of those 4 that's under the cut line right now might advance. And it would be an interesting way of doing it because, again, Chase Briscoe's all but going to have to win. Austin Cindric is all but going to have to win. Daniel Suarez and or Joey Logano could point their way in. but they have to go out and they have to get stage points in addition to finishing well. Speaking of this weekend, what's going to happen here? Not a whole lot. It's another NASCAR-centric weekend until next week. But the NHRA is in action as well. I'll admit to that. All right, so the racing will begin later today as we air live. Xfinity Series races on Saturday. The Drive for the Cure 250 presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, which will be shortened, with all due respect to Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, to just the Drive for the Cure 250. It's on the Charlotte Roval, in case you have lost all the stats for it. The road course inside the oval at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Slightly reconfigured. It's still 2.28 miles long. It's still 17 turns, but the final turns and that infield road course part of it creates a hairpin. You can go look up the map on this. It's actually pretty interesting. The drivers seem to like it. CW Network has the coverage. I'm still getting used to that. And PRN Radio does as well. 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central Time. Same course on Sunday, hosting the Cup Series for the Bank of America Roval 400. NBC and PRN Radio starting 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central Time. The good news is for all of us, NBC has the Cup Series coverage of the Cup Series throughout the remainder of the season. But we also have the NHRA. They're going to take center stage after that for the Texas NHRA Fall Nationals. It's at the Texas Motorplex and the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There's a lot of plexes. Just noting. Final's going to air on Fox Sports 1. Welcome to the NFL. 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central Time. F1 off one more weekend before they get back in action for, I want to say, 3 straight weeks here in the Western Hemisphere. Since we got some time, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what's going on in the National Hot Rod Association, because our thoughts and our prayers go out to 2 different people. One, thankfully, is returned. The other, however, is sidelined. And that person specifically is Elite Motorsports League Crew Chief for Erica Enders, Mark Ingersoll. Mark Ingersoll just went on Thursday, October the 3rd, in a Chicago area hospital, a double lung transplant. Surgery was a success, according to his family, but again, being a double transplant, there is a long road to recovery. Most of the Elite Motorsports teams was at least on site when the surgery took place, and as noted, again, a success. Within a couple of days, reported that Ingersoll was breathing on his own without any assistant, at least for short periods of time, before they actually, within a week, took him off ventilator assistance. It is expected Ingersoll will remain hospitalized for about another week or so, but then, barring any setbacks, he'll be released. He's not going to be going back to the track anytime too soon, I can tell you that. He'll have regular follow-ups for the next year or so, but yes, our hopes and our prayers go out to him. Elite Motorsports, by the way, has set up a GoFundMe to help out with the ongoing medical and upcoming care expenses. You can search Ingersoll, Ingersoll, on the crowdfunding website if you're so inclined. This is a long road to recovery. I have not experience with a transplant, but if you know anything about me over the last 3-4 years, back in 2021 I had a triple bypass surgery, and I spent most of the rest of that week. It was done on a Monday, and I spent the rest of that week in the hospital, and I was back home the next Monday, but I spent the next about 2 weeks at home doing basic stuff, just making sure that I wasn't sitting for too long and trying to walk around and get my legs back under me. And my wife is an absolute saint, and I appreciate everything that she did for me at that point in time. And since then, I've had to go in, and I had to have a stent put in because one of the grafts on the triple bypass failed. And then just a couple of months ago, really, I had to go over to Atlanta because they found a problem on the left, on the right side. All the previous stuff had been done on the left side. They found a problem on the right side, and they were able to go in and clear that blockage out and put a stent in and get everything going back up. So again, while it's not a double lung transplant, I understand some of what he's going through and the rehab situation and something like that, and introducing lungs from another person into it, because your body gets used to your own organs, we hope and we pray, if you are developed properly over the course of the 9 months in the womb and, in your earlier years. You introduce new things, the body goes, wait a minute, this is new. Is this supposed to be here? So, yes, he's got a long way to go, and our hopes and our prayers go out with him and his family and the team as well. Another medical situation seems to have worked itself out in the case of Pro Stock car driver Camry Caruso. 2022 NHRA Rookie of the Year came into 2024 with a lot of promise, said wanted to make it into the top 10, the chase for the championship. But in race 3 at Phoenix this year, she lost control of her ride. She slammed into both retaining walls and in the process suffered a broken left fibula amongst other injuries, and it kept her from even walking for some time. She says her doctors allowed that to heal naturally. In other words, they didn't set rods or screws in there. She says she's 100% now. She returned actually on Labor Day weekend at the U.S. Nationals at Indy, where she qualified 16th in that 16-car bracket. Qualified for each event since then, and says she doesn't feel really much pain or even much discomfort anymore, and appreciated her fact that the longtime sponsors allowed her the time to heal before kind of prompting her to get back in the car. So thanks and to them, obviously, yes, and welcome back to her. My goodness, absolutely. And then a couple of good bits of news here before we take our middle of the show break. Good news for NHRA fans in Arizona. They're going to have drag racing in their own backyards for at least some time to come, because NHRA officials got together with officials from Firebird Motorsports Park and the Gila River Indian community and announced a multi-year extension going to keep the NHRA running at that facility for at least the foreseeable future. So that's good news for the southwestern part of the country, because for a time they were even talking about just tearing down the facility, but they figured out a way around that apparently. And then there are, including this weekend, 3 events left in the 2024 season. NHRA has announced the finalists for the 2024 Rookie of the Year in the Mission Foods Drag Racing Series, and I'll just put them in alphabetical order. They are Pro Stock Cars Brandon Foster, Pro Stock motorcyclist Richard Gadsden, Pro Stock car Derek Reese, Top Fuelers Jasmine Salinas and Tony Stewart, Pro Stock Cars Sienna Wildgust, Funny Car pilot Daniel Wilkerson, and Top Fueler Ida Zetterstrom. And you would think Ida has probably the worst chance at it because she hasn't really run in a significant number of races. But the good news for her is that it's not just based upon your on-track performance. So otherwise, I might actually call this automatically for Richard Gadsden, who has done quite well for himself in Pro Stock motorcycle. Auto racing journalists from around the country, not us, not yet, we're hoping, will ultimately choose the winner amongst the 8 finalists through a ranking system based upon number of events participated in, so that is important. Performance on, but also off the track. So in other words, how do you come across when you appear in front of the TV cameras or talk to auto racing journalists as a whole? Participation in NHRA promotions is important. Your relationship with your fans, your sponsors, and the media is also important. So no, it's not just based upon your on-track activity. So we'll have to see who it is ultimately that comes out on top amongst those 8 drivers/riders. It's going to be interesting. Tony Stewart, by the way, won the top alcohol dragster title this year. I don't know whether you heard that or not. Sitting almost 200 points behind in Top Fuel, but, you know, hey, he's getting better at least in some aspects, so we'll keep an eye on that too. When we come back, we'll come back to IndyCar, talk a little bit more about what's going on in open wheel racing in the U.S.
Don't touch that dial. The Championship Racing Network will be right back. cans of fuel, and we're back to more racing action on the Championship Racing Network.
Playing producer and host all at the same time. I think I'm doing it okay. I haven't heard of any problems, at least on CRN Live on YouTube. And hey, things on the radio seem to be going pretty good. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Steve West. Coach Matt is now officially coaching. Producer John still doing TV duties for one more weekend at least. So hopefully he'll be back with us in some way, shape, or form next weekend. We'll find out officially next Saturday. It'll be a surprise to both you and me. All right. We've been on the air for an hour. If you happen to miss the first hour, you missed a lot. We did have Coach Matt on for the first two segments, and we talked about how the Arlington Grand Prix, that race on the streets in and around Globe Life Field for the Texas Rangers of Major League Baseball and AT&T Stadium of the National Football League's Dallas Cowboys is going to be involved. If you like street racing, it's going to be intriguing. I still kind of wonder why they couldn't figure out a deal how to run a COTA, but hey, money talks, and Jerry Jones has a whole heck of a lot of it. Just put it that way. You can go back on to CRN Live on YouTube, and you can check out the broadcast in hour number one. Other news from the world of IndyCar. Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing is closer to finalizing their 2025 driver lineup. They actually have signed this year's Indy Next champion. They signed Lewis Foster. Foster actually won his second title in 3 years in the series. He's moving up to IndyCar next year. Details on which car and who his sponsor is going to be yet to come, and who he may be displacing has not been set yet either. Foster's 21, has won just this past year 8 of the 14 races in the series, claimed the Indy Next title for Andretti Global, leading not only in wins, but he also led the series in poles, claiming 7. He led them in 12 podium finishes. He led in overall laps led. He led 362 out of a possible 640, and had one fantastic year. Not only did he finish each one of the 14 races, he completed every single one of the possible 640 laps. Quite the year for Louis Foster. Going to be interesting to see how he transitions into IndyCar. That'll be fun to watch. Looking ahead, obviously every team has the Indy 500 on their mind. It's the crown jewel race. I mean, heck, we still have 5 races, including this weekend, to go in Cup and Xfinity Series. I can guarantee you the Cup teams are already looking ahead to the 2025 Daytona 500. So if it seems like it might be a little early to be thinking about the 2025 Indy 500, I wouldn't go saying that to Able Motorsports. Able Motorsports is a title contending operation in Indy Next. And they're talking about expansion within Indy Next. Let's not get too excited here if you're thinking IndyCar. But why am I talking about it when it comes to IndyCar? It's very important. Bill Abel's looking to get into bigger forms of racing. Stated it appears that full-time going IndyCar at this time with the new charter agreement is not really an option. Remember, all those charters have been handed out. And there's a team already in front of Able Motorsports, at least chronologically, that would get a charter before Able would, and that's Prima. And they're insisting that they're going to go in without the safety net of a charter, and they plan on fielding not just 1 but 2 full-time cars next year. So knowing that, Bill's talking about maybe looking at IMSA. But he's not ruled out running some IndyCar. Witness the Indy 500. He talked to Racer.com recently and told the website, quote, that we are going to be a 4-car Indy Next team and hopefully be able to field an Indy 500 team. At least that's where we're headed to. Said he's all but finalized the 2025 Indy Next operation. Said the 2 of his rides are definitely filled with drivers named, and I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm going to apologize, and I think I even butchered it when I was doing PA at Barber Motorsports Park during the IndyCar weekend. Yuvan Sundaramurthy. And if I got that wrong, I apologize to him, but it's close. And then there's a kid by the name of Miles Rowe, and Miles is joining them from the rival Indy Next operation, HMD Motorsports. A 3rd car is more than likely going to be filled by Bill's son, Jacob. Jacob was pretty good racer at Barber from what I saw. 3rd car in the operation. Again, they're going to enter a 4th car on a full-time basis this coming year. He says he hopes to announce that driver soon. Abel noted that, though, with the charter agreement in IndyCar, it scuttled his plans to expand into IndyCar, and noted that his plans had gone as far as even acquiring not just one, but two of the Dallara DW12 chassis, and says he has those sitting in his Indianapolis race shop just waiting for them to find a couple of drivers and a couple of sponsors and put them out there. Now, when it comes to this year's Indy 500, yes, we know the 27 cars. Okay, that are going to be there. You got the 25 chartered cars, and now there are 29 full-time cars. But you got to remember, when it comes to this, number one, 33 cars start the Indy 500. Remember that. Number two, that charter agreement does not cover the Indy 500. Not in any way, shape, or form. Guarantees not a single entry that they're going to start the Indy 500. So Abel actually has just as much of a chance as anybody else of getting one or two cars into next year's Indy 500. But he got to talking about what to do with those two chassis. He said, quote, "Jacob and I are having meetings with teams trying to find a home for him. I'm meeting with teams trying to figure out if there's a future for Abel Motorsports and IndyCar and what that would look like. We're having some pretty deep conversations. I don't know where any of it is to wind up." I mean, at this point in time, take a chance. Prima's out there doing it. Got a pretty good kid by the name of Callum Ilott. They have yet to name the driver for the other car. We'll see. There's a couple of drivers that are out there that are certainly capable. There's no doubt about it. Willing. So, look around. Get yourself in there. Talked about Michael Andretti kind of stepping away, said it isn't goodbye, it's just a turning of the page. He's going to be an advisor to Andretti Global. Dan Tauris, who has been his partner actually for quite some time. He's taken over the day-to-day operations, so we talked about that with Coach Matt as well. This is a book that I'm actually looking forward to, or a series of books, as it looks like it's going to be, especially if you're an old-school IndyCar fan. AJ Foyt has a new book coming out. Called AJ Foyt, Survivor, Champion, Legend, Volume 1. It's available now, actually, from Octane Press. The author, Art Garner. Art Garner sat down and took part in a Q&A session this week at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Indiana Foyt Wine Vault, specifically. This is a little area just outside of it that is a pretty cool place from what I understand. Next time I go up there, I'm going to go in. And the Q&A session involved team president Larry Foyt, AJ's son, who has the day-to-day control of the race team. Here's what he said about the book. It's the result of 5 years of research and interviews, including a good number of photographs. Volume 1 is set to cover AJ Foyt's childhood through 1977. Why that year? That was the year he won his 4th and final Indy 500. Volume 2 will pick up from there, but according to Garner, it's actually still being written, so it's not complete yet. No release date has been announced. If you want to find the book, you can probably go to pretty much any of your favorite bookstores, Amazon.com, or go to FoytRacing.com or OctanePress.com and find out a little bit more. But yeah, I'm going to be on the lookout for this. I got to get this book. AJ Foyt was one of the few names that I knew when I got interested in racing in any way, shape, or form. And my interest in racing started with 2 little Matchbox cars, Hot Wheels specifically, that my mom bought. And that's how I knew the name. That's how I got to know the names, I should say, of David Pearson and Darrell Waltrip. IndyCar was one of those things where here in the state of Alabama, as I was growing up, about the only time you ever saw IndyCar on television was the Indy 500. So AJ Foyt was the only name I knew. And AJ Foyt was the name that stuck out to me. Even over Mario Andretti, even over Bobby Unser, Al Unser, and all the other ones. Some reason, AJ Foyt was just that name that I gravitated to. And I've been a fan of his ever since. So I'm looking forward to reading this book. I love finding out about people. I will go through when A&E had the show Biography and then kind of spun off the Biography channel. I spent probably way more time on that channel than any human being actually probably ever should. And I will devour documentaries and books about people and music artists, groups specifically that I like, I mean, I've read on Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood's biography. I've read a couple of books on the group Journey, Johnny Cash. You know, yeah, I'm fascinated to find out about people. I don't know what the heck the desire is, but this book by A.J. Foyt's just right up my alley. Talked about that record number of cars involved in the wreck in the Cup Series at Talladega last Sunday. Let's give you a couple of other things also as well here. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. claims the win at Talladega last Sunday, marks the 18th different winner in the season in the series. Is that a record? No, but it's close. Highest number of different winners in a Cup Series season in modern history, which again started in 1972, is 2001. Yeah, we got to go all the way back 23 years. 19 different drivers claimed at least one win. That was tied again in 2022. It also happened 3 times before the modern era, 1961, 1958, 1956. But again, the top series of NASCAR ran more races in a year back then. That's why I split them up. This year with 18 winners, we do have a chance to match and maybe even exceed that, as this weekend, with this weekend's race at the Roval, there are 4 races left. 18 ties 2024 with the years of 2011 and 2022 or 2002, I should say, in the modern era, along with 1960 and 1957. Again, we got Roval, we got Vegas, we got Homestead, Miami, we got Martinsville, the season finale at Phoenix. Vegas and Homestead, Miami, and to a certain extent, Phoenix, not so much wild cards. Roval's always a wild card. Road course means you could see somebody jump up and claim a win that might not necessarily do it on a basic oval track. And Martinsville's a short track. We all know about the paperclip. Generally, yeah, I would say probably it's going to come from one of the bigger teams, but you never know. Short tracks sometimes create havoc. So I could see it. The other record was the big one that happened with 5 laps left last Sunday. Again, a new Cup Series record, 28 cars involved in all, bested the prior record of 27, again, also at Talladega. And this became this white-hot spotlight, if you want to put it that way, on that new pressure jacking system and the DVP, or what is otherwise called the damaged vehicle policy. The base rule going into Talladega was that if a driver could drive the car back to the pits under any other circumstances, they could continue with no questions asked. But at the discretion of the safety officials, the racers involved in the crash could either be towed back to pit road if it seemed to only need tires, or they would tow it back to the garage. But if they towed it back to the garage, race over. Drop the window net, race over. Okay? 28 cars involved. They throw the red flag. Very few able to drive away due to flat tires and other damage. Confusion. This all led to a hearing. Okay? We'll get back to the hearing because NASCAR officials met this week with all the crew chiefs when they arrived at Charlotte. But over the radio for playoff contender Chase Briscoe, the spotter and his crew chief both effectively screamed at Chase Briscoe that if the officials came to his car and attempted to take his window net down, which, again, that net comes down, race is over, done. Doesn't matter what the shape of the car is. That he was to swat their hands away and make sure that that window net stayed up. I don't know that the same happened with Chase Elliott, but I would be fairly certain that the 9 team was pretty much telling Chase Elliott the exact same thing. Because they were all saying, and several other drivers were kind of evaluating their cars and saying, you know, if I could get rolling, I could drive back to pit road. And that's the basic rule. If the car could otherwise drive back to pit road, you're good. You can continue on in the race. If you need assistance, we are supposed to then tow you to pit road, allow you to change tires, and you can continue, right? Another playoff contender, Joey Logano, said of the whole thing after the race, quote, "Everyone is just sitting on flat tires. They want to roll, but they can't because they're on flat tires. There's this machine. We have this machine that's going to jack up the back of the car, but if you're flat on the fronts, you're still not going to be able to steer Retired champion turned broadcast professional and podcaster Kevin Harvick called it a word that we can't repeat on the air. Blank show. I'll just put it that way. Denny Hamlin, who got through the carnage and got a top 10 finish, said of it in his podcast that this whole thing was a sham. We talked a little bit about this with Coach Matt last hour. Goes back to a couple of weeks ago when Stewart-Haas Racing officials got very ticked off at NASCAR because they towed Josh Berry's 4-car behind the wall after the crash when his only problem was 4 flat tires. And while NASCAR followed the letter of the law according to their rules, in other words, they tow you behind the wall, you're done, should there be exceptions. And that appeared to be the case last Sunday when Chase Briscoe and other cars, Chase Elliott specifically, got towed back to pit road to get their tires changed, which seemed to fly in the face of precedent, right? Well, NASCAR's VP of competition, Elton Sawyer, got to talking about that this week, but there was still blowback. We'll give you Elton Sawyer's quotes, and with even more blowback from Harvick, from Hamlin, from us on Crossed Flags, and from others. I'm not saying it's just the three of us. They said, we need to get this clarified. So they finally did. We'll get into that coming up right after this.
Stay right here for more on the Championship Racing Network. Tires only, and back out to the track for more action on the Championship Racing Network.
All right, I'm going to try and see if we can't make some sense out of what NASCAR is dealing with here when it comes to this damaged vehicle policy and towing cars or either down pit road or behind the wall. All right. So mention the fact that Elton Sawyer tried to explain what happened after Josh Berry's incident and the criticism from it. He said, quote, "On the heels of last week at Kansas, our goal was never to put good cars out of the race." Okay. Last week, we got looking at that, digesting it. We could tell that maybe we should have made a different call last week. So as we went into Talladega, we wanted to make sure that we erred on the side of the competitors. We didn't anticipate seeing 25-plus cars down there, and that's why we made the decision to tow those two, Chase Elliott and Chase Briscoe, to pit road. Because both of those cars met minimum speed, we felt like that was the right call. And added that NASCAR would be revisiting this in the off-season. Matt and I dealt with this on Cross Flags in a lot more detail, so we would invite you to go check out the Cross Flags podcast on CRN Live on YouTube. Again, Hamlin called it a sham because he said this was an on-the-fly decision and that NASCAR actually never informed the drivers that they'd even determined to try and make that change in the rules as to how it would be enforced. Hamlin was even though more critical on his podcast by going so far as to say, quote, "You can't change your mindset in the middle of the playoffs." I don't know where he's been. NASCAR's always changed rules at the drop of a hat anyway. But between Kevin Harvick calling it a blank show, Denny Hamlin calling it a sham and calling them out on his podcast, and others like Matt and I on Crossed Flags calling NASCAR out for massive inconsistency when it comes to these things. This led to NASCAR sitting down, gathering all the crew chiefs together for the Cup Series when they arrived at Charlotte and laying out that there were, they say, 3 specific guidelines they're going to use when it comes to the damaged vehicle policy and towing the racers. They said that if the car has repairable damage and flat tires, like Chase Elliott and Chase Briscoe at Talladega, those cars will be towed back to pit road, and they will be allowed if they are able to get back out on track in the time required and get up and stay at NASCAR required minimum speed to continue to race. However, should there be significant enough damage, for example, water or oil spewing or leaking out, the racer would then be towed to the garage area and be out of the race. Okay, that we get. If you've lost your radiator or you are trailing oil, yeah, you're done. I get that. They added this, though. If the car has indeed all 4 tires that are all perfectly good, they're all inflated, but the car is otherwise unable to get back to pit road on its own, witness the 12 car at Watkins Glen, that car will also be towed to the garage area and be listed as out of the race. Does that help clarify it for you? Or like me, do you still feel like you're looking through mud? It seems like they are zeroing in on it. But somewhere down the line, don't you need to get somebody with some common sense? I mean, I get it. The safety crews have got a lot to deal with. But once they have gone through and they have checked, and we've all seen them, these safety crews they do a fantastic job. They converge on the scene of the wreck as quick as they possibly can. And when you're talking 28 cars, they're safety crews from all the way around the track. They were able to get there. They're checking on the drivers. They realize real quick, okay, none of the drivers are injured. Great. How about at this point in time now, we start to actually do a quick assessment of the cars. Okay, flat tires, otherwise car looks good. 14 can be towed to pit lane. Tires are flat, car otherwise looks good. Maybe a little bit of damage, probably can be fixed in time. Tow the 9 car back to pit road. 22 car. Totally messed up. And it was Joey Logano's car. This car has way too much damage to be repaired under time on pit road under the damaged vehicle policy. This goes back behind the wall. Rapid fire assessments. Get 3 or 4 people out there that you trust. I don't care if they're male or female. Get 3 or 4 officials out there, at least, probably one with each safety team, truth be told, needs to happen, who would then be in charge of assessing the cars and going pit road, behind the wall, pit road, behind the wall, behind the wall, behind the wall, pit road. It's called triage in the old MASH unit. If you go back to the MASH television show, kids, ask your grandparents. There needs to be that person. And I'm not saying you got to go hire another person to add them to the crew. I'm saying select one person, train them to be, once all the safety situations have been taken care of. In other words, you know that all the drivers are good and we don't need a medical transport. Okay? For a severe medical problem, not just a regular, okay, you crash, you're out of the race, we got to take you to the infield care center just to check you out. At that point in time, that person becomes triage. Car's good, car's not good, car's good, car's not good, go for it. How hard is that? Hope they're listening to this show, too. Talked about the lawsuit with Coach Matt last hour. This thing is messed up. But if you're just now joining us, we'll let you know the injunction that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports filed stating that they want to continue racing under the, like they still had their charters effectively in 2025, even though effectively they're going to be gone when we get to the new year dawning. Amongst the files and papers that the teams asked for, again, 26 contracts between NASCAR and independently owned tracks that have hosted at least one Cup Series, documents surrounding NASCAR's acquisition of the International Speedway Corporation, Automobile Club Racing of America, or ARCA. They also asked for the charter agreement provisions that restrict teams from competing in non-NASCAR sanctioned events using Gen 7 parts and cars. All NASCAR said that they were going to oppose the preliminary injunction. A hearing initially set for this Wednesday had been pushed back to early November. The opposition, NASCAR said in a statement, was based upon 3 detailed points. Defendants working to prepare oppositions that provide argument, applicable law, and evidentiary support to demonstrate defendants' positions. 1, plaintiffs are seeking a mandatory injunction that is only warranted in the most extraordinary circumstances, which is not present here, since they are seeking to alter the status quo through an injunction requiring NASCAR to provide charters for 2025 and beyond, notwithstanding that the time to sign charters for 2025 is expired. Again, we're suing you because of the charter agreement, that we disagree with it. So, I don't know. The number 1's on somewhat shaky ground to me. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on YouTube or on the radio. But just looking at it on the surface, it seems a little shaky. Point number 2 from NASCAR in the opposition to the injunction, quote, plaintiffs cannot establish irreparable harm since plaintiffs and their counsel have confirmed that plaintiffs' teams will compete as open teams in 2025, which means that money damages can compensate plaintiffs even if they were to ultimately prevail. Well, that's an assumption, isn't it? You're assuming that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports actually have enough money to be able to guarantee that they're not going to suffer irreparable damage. So I can't really guarantee it. Does it hurt that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports said that they intended to run anyway in 25? Yeah, a little bit. But when you dig a little deeper into that, I think it's not exactly the steadiest of ground there either. And 3, plaintiffs cannot establish a likelihood of success on the merits for multiple reasons, including that this is a dispute over contract terms, not an antitrust case. Well, here's the problem. You've got an antitrust lawyer, and they're basically saying that NASCAR is a monopoly, which at that point in time does bring in antitrust. I don't know. We'll see. In further discussion of the lawsuit, NASCAR President Steve Phelps wrote a letter to 2311. It detailed their side. According to Racer.com, the letter details what concessions they said that they've made. I gave you a few of them last time. I'll give you all of them this time. Quote, NASCAR agreed to meet well in advance of the timeline outlined in the existing charter agreement to begin good faith renewal obligations. Yeah, they were meeting several times. They extended the deadline, which NASCAR also said that they did, agreed to extend the term beyond the length of the current media rights agreement, and agreed to renewal right protections. Yeah, you did. Okay. We get all that. We're so far going with that. Created a team advisory committee to solicit additional input from the terms on major strategic decisions for the industry. Yeah, but how much of that are you actually taking into account? NASCAR absorbed all the costs of hosting and maintaining the team website on NASCAR's platform. How much did that really cost you? With all due respect. NASCAR lowered the transfer fee of charters from the initial proposal. Well, okay. It's still an expensive transfer. If you go by what we heard, Front Row Motorsports is willing to pay Stewart-Haas Racing for one charter, $20 million. That's expensive enough. Let's go back last year when Spire Motorsports bought Live Fast Motorsports as charter. Remember how much that one was? $40 million. Who cares about your little transfer fee? These things are not cheap. NASCAR waived debt limits, increased the amount of private equity participation, and worked with teams around the transfer language. NASCAR agreed to increase the financial positions of the teams. This is the biggest point that's probably going to be the stick, making them the largest beneficiary of the media revenues and financial detriment of other industry stakeholders. There was, a few years ago, we detailed this, and at one point in time, the tracks themselves became the biggest beneficiaries. And it didn't matter whether it was owned by NASCAR / International Speedway Corporation or SMI or some other track. They were the biggest beneficiaries because there's really only three ways that a track makes money. And that's ticket sales, that's selling their own sponsorship deals. And I know this because in my job as a PA announcer at Talladega, and I've done it as you probably know, if you're a longtime listener / CRN Live viewer of this, you know that I have done PA not only at Talladega, but Darlington, Richmond, Homestead, Miami, and I also do it for Barber. Each of those facilities has sponsors. And part of my job is to read those sponsors, get them out over the PA so that they get the publicity for being a track sponsor. And then the other way that they do it is they get money from NASCAR for hosting an event. And part of that is, purse and so on and so forth, but that's a very small part of it. At one point in time, that was the biggest cut of the television rights deal and even the radio rights deal. There's a whole lot of money involved in that. Now they're saying that they've switched that and it becomes the teams. And I can't remember the percentages. Again, this was done, I want to say probably the better part of 4 or 5 years ago that we read this. But I want to say it was somewhere around 40% that the tracks got. And then everything else was less from that point in time. And the teams themselves, I wanted to say, got about 15 to 20%. For some reason, the number 18% sticks out in my head. But again, being a few years ago, I could be wrong with that. They're saying it's switched. The teams themselves are saying that's not true. The teams are complaining about the fact that they still don't have a significant amount of revenue involved here. And that the ability for the drivers, for them to be able to pay their drivers, in cases of this year so far, Stewart-Haas Racing, next year that's going to change, obviously, Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick Motorsports, that's 4 drivers each. And you're paying them multiple millions of dollars to drive your really, really fast cars around tracks. But they're only about 3% of the revenue involved there. And while there's not a direct correlation between NASCAR and the stick and ball sports of things like the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NFL, when you compare the NFL and the NBA specifically, and we use them because they have specific budget caps. You have a salary cap in the NFL that's a hard cap. You got a somewhat softer cap in the NBA. They're getting 45 to 50%, the players are, of the media rights deals. Should that be the same amount of money? No. I agree. No, it shouldn't. Because the thing about it is that the franchise owners, more often than not, own the facility that they're playing in. Now, there are exceptions. Madison Square Garden is owned by the city of New York. Boston Garden the old, what I still call Boston Garden, TDI North Bank Center, whatever the heck they call it, where the Celtics and the Bruins play in the NBA and NHL respectively. That's actually owned by the Boston Bruins, and they lease it to the Boston Celtics. But in a lot of other cases, there are situations where there is an ownership stake by the ownership group of said NBA team into that facility. We've talked about Jerry Jones owning AT&T Stadium. Robert Kraft owns Foxborough Stadium, Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, so on and so forth. As a general rule, you will find more often than not, the owner of the franchise owns the stadium. There are exceptions. In this case, NASCAR owns the facilities, or SMI owns the facilities, or Roger Penske owns Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's a separate owner now of Rockingham. It used to belong to what is now SMI, but not anymore. So there are still independently owned tracks, but the tracks are separate. The teams don't own them. NASCAR, SMI, other owners own those facilities. So it becomes a lot more complicated when you get right down to it. But either way, this is about NASCAR forcing the hand of the teams because they're a monopoly. They have no competitor in the stock car racing range. Sorry to the Cars Tour. Okay, but when you look at NASCAR and you look at the Cars Tour, they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. NASCAR doesn't have a direct competitor when it comes to the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series or the Craftsman Truck Series for that matter. And because of that, yes, this becomes an antitrust case to the detriment of what Steve O'Donnell and Elton Sawyer and all the rest of them are sitting there saying. This is not an easy case. Gotten a headache. We still got 20 minutes left in the show. Let's see if we can't lighten things up a little bit. We'll give you chase clinch scenarios. Plus, we got some Formula One news coming up here as we get into the final segment of this week's edition of the Championship Racing Network next.
Go, go, go. We're back to the Championship Racing Network.
Welcome back in. We'll see how much we can get to. I'm going to leave a little bit on the table, and I'm going to tell you that right now. We just don't have the time to be able to get to it all because, God, details. All right, for this weekend's Roval race, clinch scenarios, fairly simple. William Byron's already moving on. He's the only one locked in based upon points. Should another driver outside of the playoffs win at the Roval this weekend, well, Christopher Bell automatically moves on just by starting. Kyle Larson would only need to score 4 points. Denny Hamlin, though, needs 26. Alex Bowman, 30. 31 for Ryan Blaney. 42 for Tyler Reddick. Chase Elliott would need 43. Those are your top 8. The ones under the cut line, Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, Chase Briscoe, they would all need help. Obviously, should any of the drivers in the playoffs, other than William Byron, they can clinch with a win. If that occurs, assuming that it isn't the driver that we refer to, well, Christopher Bell would need to score 11 points. Kyle Larson would then need 16, Denny Hamlin 38, Alex Bowman 42, Ryan Blaney would need 43, Tyler Reddick 54, and Chase Elliott 55 to advance on points. Logano, Suarez, Cindric, and Briscoe all would need outside help if they're not the one at the end holding the checkered flag. It's pretty basic and shows that it's a lot of points. More changes at Legacy MC. This year, they kind of came into it. They envisioned this switch from Chevrolet to Toyota would actually help them, but it hasn't really gone as they hoped, so they're changing. Again, CEO Cal Wells announced on Tuesday they're shuffling crew chiefs. Dave Ellens is leaving the organization. He was out the door effective Tuesday. His departure, having led Eric Jones to 1 win and 21 top 10 finishes in his 3 years with the team. The only win that the team has enjoyed since Maury Gallagher bought into the organization back in 2022. But that's out the door, and new crew chief on the 43 car is a guy who you probably have heard his name before. Used to call the shots for Kyle Busch, Ben Bayshore. He's been working on the 42 car for John Hunter Nemechek. With that move, it means Nemechek needed a new shot caller as a crew chief. His name, Brian Camp. Camp is now pulling double duty in the final remaining races of this year. He is also Legacy's technical director, just to let you know. Stewart-Haas Racing may be going away in their specific form at the end of the season, but it's not stopping the team from getting new primary sponsors. Vintner Camus, C-A-Y-M-U-S, I don't know, Vineyards. They've signed on to sponsor the 41 car of Ryan Preece in 2 races before the end of the year. Next weekend at Vegas and then at Homestead, Miami in 2 more weeks. They are going to highlight their California Cabernet Sauvignon, something that they've named Bonanza Cabernet. Suddenly I have a desire to go watch the Bonanza Gang on the TV show. Congratulations out to another driver in the Stewart-Haas Racing stable, specifically Chase Briscoe and his wife Marissa. She gave birth to their twins this past Tuesday. They are named Cooper Banks and Collins Ivy. Boy and girl, they joined older brother Brooks, born back in 2021. Several pictures showed up on Chase that he posted to his personal media, and one that melted the hearts of women all across the nation. One showed the 2 newborns were holding hands. Pretty cool. Friday, another bit of news out of the SHR stable. Eddie DeHaan, well-noted spotter this year for Josh Berry. He's found his home for 2025. It's not at what will be the Haas factory team either. He's actually going to stick with his 2024 crew chief, Rodney Childers. After this year, he'll call the shots for the Spire Motorsports number 7 to be driven by Justin Haley. Prior to 2024, DeHaan had been the spotter for Chase Elliott and then Jeff Gordon during his dozen years at Hendrick Motorsports. Spotted for 18 wins and helped the Chase Elliott 2022 Cup chase that resulted in that year's title. By the way, Trackhouse Racing last Sunday did a car reveal right before the Cup Series race, showed off 2 different number 88 Chevrolets. One's the Cup ride for Shane Van Gisbergen. He'll have the WeatherTech sponsorship move up with him. They'll be the primary sponsor for the majority of his Cup Series year next year. It was also noted that spotter Josh Williams, not to be confused with the Xfinity Series driver of the same name, is going to move up to Cup with SVG and be a spotter there. But in addition, the Xfinity Series ride for noted incoming rookie Connor Zilic was also shown off. It will also be primarily sponsored by WeatherTech. Both of the cars branded with the number 88 were shown off. But if you were really, really sharp with your eyeballs, you noted something. Despite looking exactly like the 2024 cars, they were not branded Camaro. They were branded Chevrolet. Camaro has actually ended production as a road car. Chevrolet has not named a replacement in NASCAR yet. So apparently all the cars that this year we call Camaros will just next year become Chevrolets. Okay. If you're a racer, car collector, anything in between, the collaboration between Hendrick Motorsports and Charlotte Motor Speedway, this might be of interest to you. It's something they've come up with called the 10/10ths Club. It says it's base located on the grounds of the track, just outside of turns 1 and 2 at Charlotte Motor Speedway specifically. This is a 20,000 square foot facility made for special events, but it also has a members-only garage, climate-controlled. There'll be a cigar lounge, a bourbon bar, and will allow you to get into racing, or at least have track days, which would include off-road driving trails. I'm thinking of Charlotte Motor Speedway right now. There are some areas that they could do that with. In addition, there'll be the 10/10th Circuit, a lighted road course with 3 configurations for members. It will be inside the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Will be as short as a 7-turn, 0.056 mile course. There is a half-mile course, a little over a half-mile, 0.56, not 0.56. That's a really short course. Medium 13-turn, 1.1 mile configuration, plus there's a 19-turn, 1.7 mile circuit. About 112 feet of elevation change in that last one, and some of that will take up the area between the Rovals turns 6 and 14. And if you have the money, you too can become a member and have some track days. Membership will give the privilege of a dedicated car concierge on site, offering maintenance and reconditioning done by engineers and mechanics of the Hendrick Automotive Group, white glove pickup and delivery, and vehicle support. Ouch. Considering the brands that Hendrick can offer, they also will offer repair services for some 30 different car makes. Cars like Acura, Ford, Chevrolet, up to higher end stuff like Audi, BMW, Lexus, Jaguar, Lamborghini. I don't know how much it'll cost to get into that, and I probably don't want to know. Note from the Xfinity Series real quick. Following last Saturday's race at Talladega, series officials determined the number 1 Chevy Camaro Sam Mayer too low in the rear, violating the ride height rule, therefore disqualified his final result. He finished 16th, but he was credited with 38th in last place, getting 1 point. Junior Motorsports noting that any appeal of NASCAR ruling is an uphill battle, but also realizing that Mayer is still in the playoff and championship hunt, decided to appeal the ruling, and it was expedited. It was heard this week, Wednesday specifically, and as one could have predicted, the appeal was denied. The penalty was upheld. The ruling read this, quote, "The panel found that NASCAR used standard inspection procedures at Talladega Superspeedway October 5th, 2024. The number 1 NXS, Xfinity Series car, found Rule 14.17.3.2.2.2. Yeah, I know. Sub, right? Was in violation, and because this dealt with a disqualification, there is no second appeal, so it sits. This penalty puts Mayer now squarely on the hot seat. Instead of being 8th, as he was directly after the race based upon their on-track finish, he now sits 11th, 13 points under the cut line. Ouch. Good luck with that. This one I don't understand. CW Network. They're now officially broadcasting all the Xfinity Series races, right? Their owner is a company called Nexstar Media Group. Said that they're looking at the 2025 and considering several options for their broadcasting team, whoever it may be. And one of those options is that the team may actually end up broadcasting several races remotely instead of traveling to the track itself. In other words, they're going to keep the broadcasting team, the studio team, in the offices in Charlotte, North Carolina at NASCAR Studios. If you're familiar with Fox Sports 1 and their coverage of the Craftsman Truck Series, they do that a lot. And if you're really paying attention, I being the media guy, this stuff sticks out to me. In that you can't watch everything. You are stuck primarily to where your camera is showing you. Okay? And I'll let you know right now, especially if you're watching on CRN Live. As I look at the camera here, I don't have a teleprompter, okay? And because I don't have a teleprompter in front of me, I have to look elsewhere. They have to look elsewhere as well. they're looking at a television screen. Because the only way that they can see the action on track is by the cameras that are at the track and what they're seeing in front of them. Over here, off to a side, will be another monitor which has all the different camera angles. And if you know how many different cameras are at a track, at a NASCAR track, you understand that it's very difficult to go looking at that monitor off to the side and quickly see all the action on the track, right? Whereas if you're at the track, you can just look up and see the track. Much easier. It's noticeable. CW Network Spain is going to pay NASCAR $115 million annually for the rights to televise the Xfinity Series through the 2031 season. Right now, they're using talent and production staff from NBC Sports, but next year it's all CW's property. Their own production staff, their own announcers, whoever they hire. And considering how much they're investing into this, this seems like a cheap way out. I'm not a big fan of it at all. Can't stand this, in fact. As we noted on a recent Cross Flags podcast, you can find it again, CRN Live on YouTube. We talked about how Renault officials have said that 2025 is going to be their final season as a Total Works operation. Officially, they are ending their engine program, and they will find it probably with Mercedes. They haven't signed anything yet, but they've been talking with them for a while. This also brings an end to the Renault company providing engines in Formula One. That stretches back almost 50 years. They've powered their own teams along with the likes of Williams, Benetton, Red Bull, and their engines have helped teams claim 12 Constructors' Cup titles. They say it'll help them save some money. Right now, the engine program with the personnel costs, say between 200 and 250 million euros a year, about 220 to 275 million dollars US annually. They say each engine they buy from another company will cost about $20 million US. If we do the math right now, considering they operate 2 cars, 4 engines allotted to each car every year by the rules, that's a minimum 160. And if you need more than that, and pretty much all the cars do at some point in time need a replacement engine be above and beyond, and we talk about the grid spot penalties they get for going above the 4 engines they're allotted, right? Now you're getting up into the previous price range. What are you saving? Nothing. Company CEO Luca Di Maio said that the family operation, Formula One operation, is a family jewel. Says, nope, not selling, not being stupid. We're planning on being in Formula One for quite a while. I don't know. I'm kind of with Coach Matt. If there's going to be one that's going to sell, first candidate, Renault. Then there's Haas F1. Haas F1 has signed a deal with Toyota Gazoo Racing. I'll try and show you this, especially if you're on CRN Live on YouTube. You can see the car. See the Toyota on the rear wing, the front wing there. There's a better look at the front. You can see the front wing there and the rear wing, and it's also on the nose cone. Take a look at the side. Gazoo Racing, that big GR sitting right there on the engine cowl. Otherwise, really sharp-looking car, almost all black. How the heck is this going to work? Well, they say that it's really, this technical alliance is more about drivers. Their deal with Ferrari for engines runs through 2028. Their deal with Dallara for chassis runs through at least that long. This is going to be about Toyota Gazoo Racing and Haas F1 being able to cross-train drivers, they say. Matt and I are going to get into more detail on this when it comes to this week's Crossed Flags, which again will come down on Wednesday because there is a lot more detail to this. We're going to get into all of that when we do that. So, yep, Wednesday, Crossed Flags. Hope you join us then. That is a CRN Live deal only. Does not air on our flagship radio station where the Championship Racing Network Big Show airs. And by the way, we'll be back next weekend for it. Hope you join us then. Enjoy the racing this weekend, whether it's NHRA, whether it's NASCAR, maybe it's both. You will have the opportunity to watch both come tomorrow. And enjoy the weather. But please, keep those in that were in the path of Hurricane Helene and those in the path of Hurricane Milton down in Florida in your thoughts and your prayers. We're talking multiple millions, if not billions of dollars in damage, lives upset, houses, property gone, lives gone, unfortunately, as well. Just keep them all in your thoughts and your prayers, and if you have the ability to help out, please do, even if it's just a couple of bucks. Go through whatever way you want to do it. We all hear about problems with this particular organization and that one. Go with the one that your heart leads you to. But certainly be thinking about him. Keep praying for him. We'll talk to you Wednesday for Cross Flags and next week right here on the Championship Racing Network. Enjoy the weekend.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Keep it coming.
So good. It's bigger. And bigger is better. Yeah.
You love it. Yes, I love that.
This is going to be huge.
Non-stop.
Here we go.
This is WFEB 1340.